Good afternoon. We'll be starting up in about 2 minutes, right at 2 o'clock.
David, how's the weather?
Hot, very hot.
Yeah, really dry too.
Really dry, yep.
Yeah.
Just for those who are joining in Zoom or Facebook Live, it's 1:59. We'll be starting up on the webinar in about 1 minute. Yeah, my walk was this week, one of them will be down to a gauging station. We'll see how low it really is.
Yeah, I try to run every day. I shortened my run last night. It was really hot last night. I got out of
That's why I go in the morning.
tough time, yeah. I was in early and it's like, oh, okay.
So good afternoon. Might as well move to the next slide there, Phil.
Okay, thanks, David.
Yep, since we're going to get started. If you don't know me, I'm David Orr. I'm with the Cornell Local Roads program. I'm the director here. And today we're going to be talking about cultivating a positive safety and health culture through the use of tailgate safety talks or safety tailgate talks. Our speaker is Phil Spiezio. He's the senior safety officer with Washington County. How long have you been there, Phil?
Been over a little over 12 years, David.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
Okay. And you're broadcasting from your office?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, in the office this afternoon.
Okay,
It's not a bad place to be today.
Got air conditioning, eh?
Hey, absolutely.
Absolutely. Okay. Sounds good. Well, with that, Phil, unless you need more of an introduction, I'll let you go for it, and I'll turn my video off just so I'm not confusing people. Have a good time.
All right.
I'll be here.
All right. Thanks, David. Hello, everybody. Phil Spiezio, Washington County Safety Officer. Been there for a little over 12 years, like David had just asked. I started in safety and health back in the late 90s. I kind of got my start, did some electrical engineering in school, got out of school, took a position with a concrete manufacturing facility and managed a concrete operation, the batch plant, for quite a few years, and then worked myself into safety and health after that. So I kind of did some frontline leadership right out of school, thrown right into the fire, if you would. So I kind of learned as I went. Been in the fire service since '81. Dating myself there a bit, but been in the fire service for quite some time. So I think that's how I first started to get a genuine interest in safety and health. And we'll get into some of the things I think that were turning points for me, trying to become a little bit safer and also incorporate or integrate safety into everything we do as opposed to separating it out. So we'll get started with that and get rolling here. So let's talk a little bit. I'd like to set the foundation for a positive work culture, because that comes into play hugely when it comes to safety and health, and having a positive safety culture is having a work environment that's positive as well. The first thing I think about is trust. I think with trust, and the more that I work with different departments, different people doing lots of different things, and it's one thing working for the county allows me to do is work with a lot of people, a lot of different people doing a lot of different things, which is very rewarding, and it keeps you on your toes. But trust is something I think that if you have that in your work environment, then everything becomes much easier. If you lack in trust, then things get a bit more difficult. Not saying it's not impossible, but it is certainly a bit more difficult. So do what you can to develop trust in the work environment, in your safety environment, things of that nature. Do what you say you're going to do. Really, that's the fundamental building block of building trust is do what you say you're going to do, be who you are. Leadership is something that falls right in here. If you treat people right, they will follow. Leadership is critical when it comes to not only safety cultures, but also work cultures as well. And then you need something called communication to tie it all together. So how many out there, I think we're going to try to do a poll question here. How many people wish they could communicate better?
There you go, Phil.
Oh, wait, super. Thanks, David. So I can see the poll question. So how many people out there wish they could communicate better or wish their boss could communicate a bit better?
We'll wait until they get about 75% of the people voting. It's anonymous, folks.
Okay.
We aren't recording this.
That's right. I don't know who you are. It's funny. I was doing I do a fair amount of training, obviously in person, and last fall I did a radio station training. So I sat in an hour, and the people that knew me said, "Oh, how are you going to do a radio station interview?" And they said, told me, "Oh, don't worry about it. They go to station breaks every 10 minutes. You'll have a commercial break or something such as that." And I just sit for an hour without wiggling any papers on a radio station doing an interview. So
That'd be hard for you, Phil.
yes, that would be very hard for me. As you know me a little bit, David, I tend to talk with my hands. I'm a bit Italian, so it tends to be a bit difficult. So, okay, good response. So good. Okay. That's kind of what I expected, because I've always worked on trying to and wish I could communicate better too. So a lot of people that know me wish that I didn't communicate quite as well. I tend to talk a little bit, but part of communication is listening and listening intently. So being sure that you understand before looking to be understood is a good attribute for both the safety side of things and the work culture side of things. So that's a little bit about the foundation of a positive work culture. Trust, leadership, and communication, a blend of them, and you're well on your way to a positive work culture. So talking about work cultures and saying, okay, how do we get things done? What do we want to do? What are we going to measure and get accomplished? So goals, strategy, and tactics come to mind. Goals, you need to have a goal, work-wise, safety-wise, quality-wise, everything you need that you want to establish, that you want to create some sort of a goal and then communicate that goal with people, with yourself, teams, that sort of thing. So goals, strategies on how you're going to achieve those goals, and then tactics carrying out the specific items, the specific task to determine how successful you're going to be by meeting the strategies and then eventually meeting the goal. So just about every portion of your personal and professional life, there's something established for goals, strategies, and tactics. You have something set up, and just about all of the time, how well you perform those, you set the goals, set up the strategies, and then perform the tactics determines how well you do, how successful you are. If you add into the communication part of that, communication being part of the glue. So the goal, strategies, and tactics of now your team, you add in communication, and that gives you a real firm foundation for team efficiency. So something to think about is goals, strategies, and tactics, and then being sure if you're a part of a team, communicating those within the group, within your team, so everybody knows, okay, this is the goal. All right, these are the strategies. All right, these are the tactics that we're going to take care of, to perform, to meet the strategies, and then eventually the goals. And one of the things I see with teams and working with different teams is communication's the glue that holds this together. And if you change your goals, change your strategies, or in some while have to change the task that you're accomplishing through the tactics, you need to communicate that back. Oftentimes we get started and we're doing pretty well, and then we have a little change, and we don't communicate that back. So something to think about is communication. You kind of see in a little while where this all comes into play. So now looking at overall peak efficiency. So what are we trying to do? We're trying to create a safe work environment where everybody goes home whole, right? So, one of the things we have to ask ourselves, all of ourselves, is, what I'm about to do right now, am I being safe? Meaning, is it possible I could hurt myself or someone else? And if the answer to that is yes, we've got to rethink and do something a bit different. So safety is obviously very important when it comes to peak efficiency. Another thing that's important is quality, right? If you don't make it what the customer wants, if you don't provide the service that the clients are looking for, you have to do it again. And we don't want to do that. So if we're going to build something, we want to build it right the first time. So quality comes into play here. We don't want to have to do it again. And then ultimately to continue to make sure we're going to meet that peak efficiency is productivity. And this is basically, the question I ask myself is, am I doing something worthwhile? And that doesn't mean you have to be continuously shoveling or raking or pouring concrete or whatever it is you're doing. But you have to look at it and say, am I being worthwhile? Is this conversation I'm having right now something that's going to benefit our team long-term type thing? So one of the things I like to talk about here is minimizing risk. And part of the safety program, you have to have that ahead of time. You have to take a look at the risk and minimize or eliminate the risk as much as possible. Safety and quality kind of go hand in hand. You could almost write a safety program, take out safety and put quality in it, and you'd have the quality program. And then productivity is just coming up with ways to be sure you're performing worthwhile work most of the time, if not all of the time, and try to get some good measurements in place and some targets for those goals we talked about the previous slide. One of the things I learned as starting out in kind of frontline leadership concrete manufacturing plant is that you can't separate safety out. So in other words, I didn't work on safety for 2 hours in the morning, quality for 3 hours, and then focus on productivity, for the next 6 hours or 5 hours or whatever it was. You want to try to integrate safety as well as quality into the work environment. So don't separate them out, but include it in everything you're going to do. And that kind of intertwines that culture of doing it right the first time, not getting anybody hurt, and being productive. So we jump into a little bit about where we're going to go now. And I think this will start to set the stage a little bit so that when we start talking about safety toolbox talks, where this all fits in. So priorities and values, and oftentimes I drive by a place and they have a sign up saying safety is our number one priority, or we've worked this many days without a lost time work incident, things of that nature. One of the things I like to talk about, priorities versus values. Priorities, can they be changed? Can they be influenced by outside factors? So think about that for a second. Our priority was to get up this morning and start looking at our task list and figure out, all right, what are we going to do today? What are our priorities? What do we need to accomplish today? Could those priorities change by outside circumstances? So if we have something that comes up, most of the time, at least a fair amount of the time, priorities can be changed because of outside influences, right? Something's important, but then something else happens and we have to reprioritize our work. And that something else is an outside influence. So when we say safety is our number one priority, it could be viewed as that it's our number one priority until something else takes over that priority. So something I always like to refer to is the value, the values. The values are more of the way you were brought up, what's truly, truly most important to you. And those values, how you were brought up or who you're made of or what you stand for, they're not easily as changed by outside influences. So when we say we have to get this piece delivered and it's got to occur by 7 a.m. tomorrow morning, if safety is ingrained as a value in your organization, the frontline leadership doesn't say we have to do that safely. It's already a given. It's understood. We don't sacrifice our values or change our values or reprioritize our values as much as we do our priorities. So we'll come back to that, but I just wanted to kind of put that in everybody's mind, the difference between a value and a priority. All right, so we talked a little bit about the core value and a foundation for a positive work culture and how to measure that and things of that nature. Let's talk a little bit about safety and the vision and some common goals. So let's throw up 3 typical goals of an organization related to safety that I often see. And the first and foremost is the 0 lost time incidences. We don't want somebody hurt to the point where they can't do the same thing they could do before they were injured. And 0 lost time incidences, I'm going by the OSHA definition for the most part there. We don't want somebody injured to the point where they can't do the same thing they could do before they were injured. So that's, really our number 1 goal. Everybody goes home whole every day. A second goal that's common out there is property damage, right? We don't budget for property damage, whether it's product or whether it's buildings or machinery or equipment. When we set our budget for the year, we're not setting a budget for, Phil's going to back into the overhead door and cause $5,000 worth of damage, right? We don't do that sort of thing. And probably if we went to a board meeting or we went to meet with the president and say, we need some money this year, we're probably going to have an incident that's going to cost us some money. We've got to probably rethink that before we put that in the budget. So another goal is 0 lost dollars, from any sort of property damage incidences. And third you find on the list is the compliance with all safety and health laws. So my regulatory friends sometimes question this and say, well, how come we're third on the list type thing? So, but it's not that it's not important. It's just, we want to make sure everybody goes home whole every day. We want to make sure we keep our business as productive from a quality and a safety standpoint as much as possible. And then compliance, when you start looking at it, that's the minimum requirements to hopefully keep people whole. So compliance is important. It's on the list. It's just third on the list. But then I like to throw in this culturally ingrained safety as a deep-seated value in everything we do. So talking about from the slide before and talking about the difference between priorities and values. This is where I see that we can really make a difference when it comes to safety is really taking a look at it and say, do we truly mean what we say? We want you to be safe, and having all of the team members believe that when you say you want them to be safe, you want them to do it right, that we truly mean that. And we're not just saying that because we're in management or we're in a safety person seat or something such as that. And I know, I think way back when I started getting into safety and health more so the late 90s, we had an incident rate of north of 17.5, that sort of thing. So in other words, we were having an OSHA recordable incident rate, recordable rate of that many people being injured. And that's an awful lot when you look at industry average being 7, 8, 9 for that type of an industry. So one of the things I found that helped us immensely was getting this culturally and understanding what safety meant and integrating it into a value-based system, so that we had safety committee, we had safety teams, we had people that were included, that we truly meant that we want safety to be first and foremost on people's minds. So culturally ingraining safety as a deep-seated value in everything we do is something that really, really starts to get things going a bit. So let's talk about safety and health culture. So we talked a little bit about the vision, we talked a little about safety value, and now we'll talk a little bit about safety and health culture before we start talking specifically about the toolbox talks. So here I've got, the organization, right? Safety and health culture. The organization has an impact, right? It determines something from a safety and health standpoint. We also have leadership. Obviously, they play a major part. The team members themselves, right, play a major part in that, as well as the safety and health professional. But something that's real critical in this under the leadership is the frontline leadership. So I'd like to ask the question now, how many people do we have on the call that are in this role currently, frontline leadership? So how many people today are on the front lines, if you would, from a leadership standpoint? I'll just pause for a second to give you a chance to answer that question.
So Phil, just to make sure people are on the same page, we're talking about crew supervisors and the shop foreman and
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly. Shop foreman, the frontline leadership, the supervisor that oversees the day-to-day activities, oftentimes has a layer or two above them, and also maybe a layer or two, that report through to them.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks, David.
We're getting close.
Okay.
Got to get to 3/4, folks. I know you can do it.
And David, by the way, we're going to about 4 today, right? That sort of thing.
You can go to 4. I'm not.
I get that answer all the time. Well, you might still be here, but nobody else will be.
Here's
Okay.
your results.
Okay, good. Okay. All right. So looks like about half or so are in that frontline leadership role. That's great. That's super. That's just what I was kind of looking for. So the frontline leadership is very much key to this safety and health culture. And we'll talk about how the safety toolbox talks fit into that. The tailgate talks fit into that as we get going. But the frontline leadership people are key. They're getting pulled in a couple different directions. Management's telling them, hey, we got to focus on this, this, and this. And then, oftentimes the team members, their teams are saying, well, geez, we got this, we got this. So you're kind of doing a little bit of a juggling act. But I'll tell you, those people, from my experience, they're watching you, they're looking at you, and you really have the most impact, certainly on the safety and health culture, and oftentimes on the work culture as well. What you do and how you handle yourself and how you take care of business plays a huge role in the safety and health arena, and also the work arena. So, all right, so let's get into a little bit more now of the safety and health program, and then jump into the safety talk. So 2 distinct parts. When I think about the foundation of a safety and health program, I'm thinking of 2 distinct parts. The first one being hazards and hazard controls. So this is the simpler, I think, of the 2, is what are our hazards and how do we control our hazards? If we can focus on that, everything else kind of comes into play. You can develop policies and procedures. You can talk about what you need from engineering designs or work practices or PPE. What do we need to train on, and things of that nature are all from the hazards and the hazard controls of what you do. And we'll talk about that a bit more in a second. The second is the human element factor of it. And the human element factor of it is the much more difficult one. How many of this, it won't be a poll question, but just to think a little bit about it, is the human element side of things is the much more difficult side of things. It's how oftentimes is any one of us talked about doing something and keep doing it, even though we might think or might know that it's a little riskier than what it needs to be. The human element is I think the part of the program where we can really make a difference. Lots of the hazards, we know about them, and we know what we need to do to control the hazards. It's just, do we actually follow those hazard controls each time? So, all right, so let's talk a little bit about hazards and hazard control. So the first thing we have to do is try to see what it is we do, right? So what are we going to do? What are we going to do, right? What are the tasks that we're being asked to do? The next item is hazards. What hazards are you exposed to, right? So what are we doing? What hazards are connected with this? And then finally, what are we doing to control those hazards? What type of protection do we need? So I've got a poll question regarding the job safety and health analysis. If we could pull that up maybe, and we can see if we can get some answers for that. So the question is, who should help with your job safety and health analysis? Because really this is what we're looking at here is, what do you do, the task, what are the hazards you're exposed to for those tasks, and what are the control measures that are needed for your protection? If you could take a minute and just answer who should help with those job safety and health analysis, we'll get an idea and we'll be able to go forward with the next slide.
And just so you know, folks, you can check more than one answer. So we're getting there, Phil. We're getting there.
Good, good, good.
Where's your logo, by the way? You didn't have a logo shirt on in that picture.
Oh no, that was a safety days picture, and I didn't have my shirt on, my logo, one of my logo shirts. I only have 3 of them, David, so I have to wash them every once in a while.
Be careful with them. Okay. Okay. Here are the results. Here you go, Phil.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. So we got a lot of answers out there. And good. No one said no one. So great. And one of the things I was happy to see is the employees are really high on the list there. And what more of a way to be including your people than the people doing the work, right? So you certainly don't want to come write a job safety and health analysis and say, to tell somebody, here you go, this is how you're going to do it from now on. To somebody that's doing that sort of job each and every day. So they know, and you can go back and you can talk about a job safety and health analysis, write it down. You can go back to them and say, hey, what do you think? Do we capture everything? Is there anything we're missing? You know, that sort of thing. And they'll tell you, and oftentimes how successful you are is when you go back and you see they're actually following the job hazard analysis. But if you put these together, your whole program is right there. What do you do? What are the hazards you're exposed to? And what do you need to do to control or protect yourself from those hazards? So that's really a good sound start to your safety and health program foundation. If you have good JSAs or good JHAs or good JS or JS and HAs, that you've got a real good start.
Okay, Phil. Give me the acronym. What's the acronym?
Oh, job safety and health analysis or job safety and health analysis. So job safety analysis or job safety and health analysis. So gotcha. JSAs and JHAs. Super. Thanks, David. All right. So that's a little bit safety and health program foundation, hazards, hazard controls, and then we're on our way. So the next, the next element, if you remember, the next hazards is how do we actually decide what's the best hazard control? So we've got the hazards, and now we're going to say, okay, how do we control those hazards? So I threw up a picture of our gear at the fire department. You notice we've got a little addition to it, and that's the surgical masks. We put them on as soon as we get to the station and don't take them off unless we need our SCBA. So, but I thought it's a good picture of the PPE. So oftentimes when we start thinking about hazard controls, the first thing we think about is PPE. But that really, there's some steps we need to do before we go to the PPE or the personal protective equipment route. So the first and foremost is elimination or substitution. Do we really have to do the job, right? Or is there, let's say from a flammable liquid standpoint, is there something like a flammable liquid that we can substitute in, so it's a bit of a lesser hazardous thing? So like you wouldn't want to use a liquid flammability product of say a rating of 3 when you're doing torch work or any sort of hot work. So you want to find a chemical that would do the same thing, only less hazardous. So that's the substitution part of it. So elimination or substitution is by far the best. Engineering controls next. Like an engineering control would be bulletproof glass in a bank. It would be now our plexiglass that we're separating ourselves from others when we're less than 6 feet from the COVID-19 and other viruses that we're seeing out there. Administrative controls, which are work practices and procedures and things of that nature, right? Policies and procedures for the most part fall under that. Training, we're talking about that today. One of the things we like to talk about when we're doing training is you don't train until you get it right. You actually keep training until you can't get it wrong. So training is a big part of this as well. But from a hierarchy standpoint, it's down the list a little bit. And then finally, last, which is oftentimes one of the first things we jump for, is the personal protective equipment. But that's the last thing we want to think about from a hierarchy of hazard control. Now we get another quick poll question. I'd like to know, why do you think I have the backslashes between the top 2 control measures in the bottom 3, and my finger didn't get stuck on the button? So if you would just take a minute and answer that question about why do I put the backslashes between the top 2 control measures and the bottom 3?
Should we play some Jeopardy music now, Phil, while we're waiting?
Yeah, it's not a bad idea. Yeah, they've been pretty quick.
Well, this one takes a little bit. I got to read it a little bit.
But this one here, but they've been pretty quick.
I got to read it a little bit. That's a challenge.
Yep.
You're making them think. That's good. We'll get at least half the people voting before we move on.
Okay. All right.
Almost there.
And there's some choices there, so
it's a bit of a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Just need probably one more person and we can move on.
Okay.
Okay. There are the results for you.
Okay. All right. So it's spread out a little bit. But it looks like we've got a few people, about 25%, just under that, actually picked the answer I was looking for. So when you look at this here, this list, and you see the backslashes from the top 2 to the bottom 3, who do those bottom 3 control measures rely on? Right? When you following a work practice or procedure, or following the training we agreed upon or learned, you remember the training, or from the personal protective equipment, you make the choice on if you wear it properly and you take care of it and things like that. So the bottom 3 really rely on us. And we'll talk a little bit later in the program about it. But I think oftentimes, I know myself, if I relied on myself to keep myself safe all the time, I'd probably have a few hiccups now and then, where the top 2 kind of separate the hazard out from us. Like in engineering control, it'd be a guard on a PTO shaft on a tractor, right? If it's properly guarded, it can't hurt us, right? Regardless of what we do around it. If we properly guard an in-running nip point, we can't get to it, and obviously if we eliminate or substitute it, it can't hurt us as well. So the engineering controls are really the main focus when you start looking at the hierarchy of hazard control. Like if you got to go out and cut concrete, right? The first thing we think about is, all right, we're going to have to run a saw. So we need hearing protection. We need eye protection, that sort of thing. We need dust because there's going to be dust. And one of the things we got to think about is, geez, maybe we should put a wet saw in the process, engineer the wet saw in, and that reduces the amount of dust and things so that, we'd still wear your PPE. But the hazard would be greatly reduced through engineering controls. All right, so let's get to that second component. And this is that human element component. So I want to take the position here real quick of many of us when we're at a safety talk or a safety training, right? And maybe not this group so much, but we have a safety training and we kind of, okay, it's time for our safety meeting, right? We got to sit back and yep, we're going to catch a few Z's and relax a little bit. We're doing our safety training, right? So the human element part of it is something that we've got to consider a little bit. And I think you probably all have seen that before, that time to do safety training, time to grab a cup of coffee or take a little nap or something such as that. So I've got a couple of slides here on the human element that I'd like to kind of talk a little bit about. The first one is a 5-gallon upside down bucket. So I'd like to ask the question, how many people have stood on an upside down 5-gallon bucket because they just needed a little extra height to reach something?
So raise your hands. Use the raise your hands feature near the bottom. Raise your hands. Let's see how many we get here.
They're going up fast, David. Yeah.
That's because we're not recording their names. See,
no, that's good. We don't want to do that. So we got a number of people that are raising their hands saying that they stepped on a 5-gallon upside down bucket. So, and I'm not surprised about that. The whole risk versus reward thing. There was one particular job site. It wasn't in Washington County. It was in Saratoga County. I came through it. It was a trench job, and trench boxes, you've got to do some rigging, and the rigging is up higher on the trench box. So you kind of got to get up in the air to rig the trench box. They had no less than 3 5-gallon buckets stacked on top of each other with a person on top of that doing the rigging. So
Watch this, Phil. Okay, people, raise your hands if you've ever stood on a rolling swivel chair to change something or pick up a picture. Again, we don't care the names.
Yeah.
We're just looking at the
No
numbers.
names, just hands. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes I ask the question of who stood on a bar stool, had somebody turn the bar stool while they held on the light bulb and screwed it into the light socket. I don't know if we want to ask that here.
No. Let's move on.
A number of people have admitted to that. So, all right. So let's talk a little bit about the human element and why this is so important. So a couple of things here. It's not going to happen to me, right? I've gotten away with it before. I didn't understand the hazards or the hazard controls, right? That comes up a bit. But lots of times it's not going to happen to me, that type of attitude, or I've got away with it before. Why is something going to be different this time? And oftentimes when I have gone to fatal accidents, it's not something that people have done for the first time. It's people that have done it for a while that way and just got away with it. So that's what we want to try to prevent. We want to prevent ourselves from ourselves. So I got a little bit of a picture here that I wanted to put in, kind of I think sets the stage for what we're talking about. So it looks like Christmas lights, right? Is that a ladder that gentleman's standing in? So distractions, complacency, laziness, the need for speed, right? We have this overwhelming desire for the need to get things done. Distractions, it's hard to see distractions now without thinking about the cell phone and how much of a distraction the cell phone has become. But I saw somebody out my office window walk right into a light pole one day using their cell phone, walking along the sidewalk. Ouch. And another thing, I came up with a good video. It's for building and grounds last year, doing a safety training. I actually was able to pull up one of our cameras on our campus, and it showed a person running a tractor, a lawnmower with a wagon behind it. He was on his phone and he ran right into a bollard protecting the gas pumps. He backed up, never stopped looking at the phone, backed up and drove around the bollard still using his phone. So we have to think a little bit about distractions and things like that. So anyway, that's a little bit about the human element and why it's important to think about that from this process. So real quick, I want to throw out, because it's relative to what we do and where we go from our safety talk standpoint. So low frequency and low risk, that doesn't keep me up at night, right? Not doing it very often, and it's very low risk. So the risk of injury is very low. So not real worried about that. High frequency and low risk, one of the things you have to watch out for there is complacency. That was on the other slide. But other than that, it's low risk, very, very low risk of injury and minor injury if something did result. The high frequency, high risk, a little bit more worried about that, but we're doing it all the time. We get really good at it and we understand the risk, and we can protect ourselves and others in that situation. The one thing that keeps me up at night is the low frequency, high risk stuff. You got to be very careful about that. If we're not doing it very often and there's high risk with it, we've got to have a toolbox talk. We got to talk about that starting a week ahead of time, that sort of thing, a couple weeks ahead of time. Gordy Graham, if you haven't seen it, Gordy Graham has a wonderful video out there, a little 10-minute, 12-minute video on low frequency, high risk, and it's well worth your time to take a look at that. So now, how does all this relate to the safety tailgate talk, the toolbox talk, things of that nature? So now we'll get into relating how the safety toolbox talk, the tailgate talk, actually applies and how this can be such a great tool, especially for the frontline leadership people. So let's jump into it. Safety tailgate talk or toolbox talk, it simply builds trust. We talked about that earlier, the importance of trust and being a foundation of the work culture, for a positive work culture, and how much it helps everything else. So it's a great way to build trust. It's a great way to show leadership, the frontline leadership people doing it. and it also provides communication. So it's a great way to say safety is important. It's part of everything we do. And it's a great way to promote both the positive work culture and the safety, promoting a positive safety culture. So we talked earlier about in the slide, trust, leadership, and communication. And if you look at the tailgate talk and what it provides, it builds trust, it shows leadership, and it provides a method for communication for frontline leadership, which is right there. It's the key to all this and making sure that we keep people going home whole every day. So they got to be concise and informative. You don't want to have too large of a topic. If you have big topics, drop them down in size, make them smaller, keep them concise, but also keep them so they're informative. Worksite related, if they're specific to what you're doing right now, that's always a big help. Cover specific tasks, don't make it too broad. And when you're covering the task, talk about the hazards and also the hazard controls. It's a great way to establish credibility for the frontline leadership people. It definitely gives some credibility, and it also gives you responsibility or demonstrates that you have responsibility. It's a really, really good way to show your team that they matter and that you care. You're taking 15, 20 minutes out of your day talking about safety related stuff, and right to the point. You can include people, you can have questions, things of that nature. So that's a real good start to the tailgate talks right there. So a successful tailgate talk, what actually makes it successful? How do you do it? Here we got a picture, just recently did a safety toolbox talk last week. We're opening up our church, and we wanted to make sure that everybody was on the same page. So the their tailgate talks can go over a wide variety. Talk about today's topic, right? Also talk about what happened last week, learn from near misses, or if you got a safety work order in, hey, what's the status of the work order? What are we doing until we get the tools we need, that sort of thing. Some interim guidelines. What is coming up next week? It gives you an opportunity to say, hey, we got that job coming up next week. We don't do it very often, but here are the hazards associated with that job. So it gives you an opportunity to take a look at that. And allow time for questions. One of the things you want to make sure here is that it's interactive and everybody has the ability and the time to ask some questions, so you can keep that through. So be brief. So, I put around 15 minutes or so. It's give or take depending on the topic. Specific to the task at hand. Utilize the experienced team members. That's a real big one here, is when you're doing the talk, and especially the frontline leadership's on the call. Don't be afraid to see if there's some members that have some experience, either, a firefighter, volunteer firefighter, or EMS provider, or someone has some interest, or, you have somebody, we have somebody really good with chainsaws. I believe he's born with a chainsaw in his hand, but you can bring in some experienced people that have some information, maybe have some people that are really good with work zones and in the flagging operation. It's a good way to include them in to the safety program. So they can be informal and periodic. So in other words, keep them light, but make sure you do them on a regular basis, because you don't want to do them and then have them fall by the wayside. So, one of the things I run into once in a while, it's the flavor of the month or flavor of the week or something like that. But once you get started, you want to stay with it. People are looking for them. They documented wise, it's good to have them documented. It doesn't have to be all fancy, but some sort of documentation, and also have a sign-in sheet so you can document who is there. It's a good way to do the training in bite-size morsels that people will understand and actually remember type thing.
Hey, Phil, I saw this come up. Are you asking folks to document now, or are you doing roll calls with tailgate talks?
Yeah, I meant to cover that too. Thanks, David. So what I'm doing now is I've got a COVID-19 training sign-in sheet, and I'm actually writing the names down of the individuals I'm doing the training with now. So normally, there's a sign-in sheet, and you just share that sign-in sheet and pass it around. And now when we're doing the tailgate talks, we're waving the sign-in sheet, or we're having them sign in with their own pens. And when I'm doing the training, I'm just signing their own names. So the foremen that are doing it right now, that's what they're doing. So good. Thanks, David. Thanks for that. I'm glad I didn't miss that. So yeah, with the COVID-19, there's a couple things. I have to carry a ruler around now and multiple pens. And I don't know if anybody's got it and if they can see it, but this New York State Clean sanitizer stuff is great stuff. So I've been using that a fair amount now to try to keep sanitized. So practice what you preach. That's real important from a frontline leadership standpoint. You can't talk about these trainings and then go out and do something different. All right. So if you're going to talk about fall protection over 4 feet or over 6 feet, things of that nature, you have to be sure that when you're out there on a job site, you're actually following that and making sure you have some sort of fall prevention or fall protection in place for those things. So practice what you preach. That's real important. You don't want to say something and then do something different. And I took this off the Cornell website. We'll get to that in a minute. I'll show you where some safety talks are on the Cornell website. And there's other sources too that we'll go over. But the KISS, keep it simple. And then might surprise you a bit, before safety. So keep it simple. That's really a good way of doing it. Don't try to bite off too much. If you're doing it once a week, you got a lot of time to break things down and talk a little bit about it. So keep it light, keep some sort of documentation. Now, this day and age, we're probably signing people, or, one person signing people in, or you're using, separate pens, that sort of thing. So, one of the things that have kind of gone along the lines when I've done tailgate talks, they've kind of changed a bit. I used to put them in bulletized format and things of that nature. Now I'm kind of making them because I realize people are kind of putting them up. They're leaving them on break tables, or they're putting them up on the boards. So it's nice to make them so that you can actually look at them and things like that. And time permitting, you should be able to put up a couple here in just a second. So putting some more stuff on the tailgate talks to kind of wrap it up is be sure they're inclusive. Be sure that you involve the people there. It certainly improves morale, and it also improves productivity. Integrating safety in improves productivity for sure, because if your morale is up, people want to do a good job, and they want to make it so that you're as productive as you can be. Safety talks are a really good tool for that sort of thing. So some resource, I mentioned this just a couple slides ago, but Cornell Local Roads has a really good place. I'm going to try to toggle to that in a second. Also OSHA, New York State DOT, Safety and Trade Associations. We just started up Empire State Safety Association. It's about a year and a half old now, and we're looking for people. A lot of people belong from town and village and county municipalities around the state. We're going to try to be one of our goals is be a resource for everybody, so that we can share information and things like that. So the Empire State Safety Association. Hopefully, you'll see some more stuff from that coming out if you haven't seen that yet. Some insurance companies and then other partners are places that you can go and take a look at some of the resources out there for safety toolbox talks. You can also make them yourself, things like that, but try to pick and choose what you do and have them relative to what it is you're doing that week or coming up next week, that sort of thing. So hang on, I'm going to take you to the Cornell website here.
By the way, Phil, while you're doing that, Adam found your video of Gordy Graham, so I'm going to put it in the chat pod.
Oh, good. Okay, wonderful. That's great. Yeah, that's wonderful. So that's awesome. So here's the Cornell Local Roads front page. So this is their home page. And then if you scroll down just a little bit, you can see here where the registration that you registered for the training today. And also there's a little thing you can click on here for tailgate talks for download. And you can click on this and a whole bunch of tailgate talks come up on how to do a tailgate talk. And there's a whole library of them there. So we can click on one. I think one was ladder safety that I pulled out to take a look at. So we'll see if it comes up here. If not, I've got a couple other topics that should go. Oh, and here it is right here. So you can kind of take a look at some of the fundamentals of the ladder and how the ladder safety type stuff. And we got different things here on the bulletized thing, the video and things like that. And also there's a sign-in sheet that goes with these talks that you'll see. So this is something that's a resource that you can get right here from David Orr and Adam and everybody from Cornell. So it's a great resource that's been put together. And there's also a tab up at the Library Center that you can see this sort of thing. So anyway, thought that was worth taking a look at and sharing with people. And then I've got a couple here I'd like to share, just time permitting. So this is one that kind of just some bullets. So there's a picture of the 5-gallon bucket, but just kind of some things on, hey, what we've done this before in the past, probably, shouldn't have, got away with it, but maybe we won't get away with it, the next time. So how many of us have left a tool on top of a step ladder, right? And then went ahead and moved the ladder. Not wearing your seatbelt for a quick ride to the store, because the screwdriver has a pry bar, right? Tool is a hammer, that sort of thing, if it's not a hammer. The chair is a ladder, especially with wheels on it, or the 5-gallon upside down bucket, and then so on. One of the things you want to be really careful of is using a step ladder as an extension ladder. That does not work well. So that's a little something there. Not using a ground fault circuit interrupter, that's a big thing for me. And then here's a more recent one. And this is one you can see it was kind of made for posting too. But I broke it up a little bit. And, washing your hands, what are the symptoms? Don't forget your mask, stop the spread, things of that nature. So, this a lot I found on bulletin boards and break tables and things like that. People could kind of take a look at it. Here's an example of the sign-in sheet that's attached to it. So we make it pretty easy. We send this out to frontline leadership so they can do this. So this was an update, and there's a date that they can fill in on the sign-in sheet, so they can do it multiple times and things like that. So to establish a resource. So there's one with bulletized, and then there's one with a little bit more of the pictures type of thing. And then here's one that kind of plays into what we were talking a little bit about today. I put this out, interesting enough. We were probably in the middle. Things were really deteriorating as far as the pandemic and the COVID-19, things of that nature. So people were starting to have a difficult time communicating and working with each other. So I thought it was time to share this sort of thing. And it's all about, positive work culture and safe and efficient work, trust, do right, communicate, attitudes of choice, passion to win, things of that nature. So I kind of threw that out, hoping that people would just communicate a bit and respect other people's opinions, so that we could make the best plans possible to keep people safe, but yet also do some things for the taxpayer, so that we were being as productive as we possibly could. So back to the slides and the resources. Certainly,
I added one more resource in, Phil.
Oh, good.
Our partner LTAP centers around the country have a national association. I put the link to the national page. We've got a whole bunch more tailgate talks there as well. So.
Okay, great. Awesome. Yeah, because there's a lot of resources out there, and I'd certainly be able to, would want to help anybody looking for some tailgate talk resources and things like that. So I found that it's a really great tool, especially for frontline leadership, to keep things going. So that's a little bit about that. And I want to wrap things up here shortly, because David said I couldn't go to 4. But let's talk about the safety and health culture. So we talked about a workplace and a work culture foundation. We talked about a safety and goal vision, and how that fits into everything. And then let's wrap up and talk about how does this all fit together? What's the possibility of what a safety and health and a positive safety and health culture can do? So one of the things I talk a little bit about is encourage people to think things through. So make sure the brain is engaged before putting body into motion. That's something that's real important. Sometimes we just act and we don't think before we act. So encourage people to think things through, right? The need for speed sometimes comes from within, or oftentimes comes from within. We do have time to talk. I was doing a presentation almost a year ago now, and I was up doing a presentation. There was quite a few people back before social distancing was a thing, and we had probably 150, 200 people, and I was up there talking, and I just stopped. I stopped talking, and I started a stopwatch that was in my pocket. And I didn't say a word. I just stood up there, and I didn't stop the stopwatch until somebody said, Phil. And I stopped the stopwatch. And it was, I think, 21 seconds for that group when I started a stopwatch to when I stopped it before somebody had said something. And that 21 seconds felt like an eternity. But if you just think things through for 20 seconds, you're probably going to do the right thing. The second thing is dominoes. I like to refer to dominoes. And this is something that we've talked about for a long time in the safety environment. Everybody has the opportunity to pull a domino out. It's when the incident occurs, the last domino falls, the incident occurs, no one pulled the domino out. And that's what we have to work on is we have to be sure that someone within our team pulls the domino out so that last domino doesn't fall. That prevents the incident from occurring. And then the goal, the ultimate goal, everybody goes home whole every single day. And if we encourage people to think things through, if somebody is ready all the time to pull out one of the dominoes, and everybody's going to go home whole. The fatalities I've investigated and stuff or helped people investigate or responded to as a firefighter, when you look at it, it's usually a series of events that occur that fall into line, and no one was able to stop it. So real important to take a look at that and see what you can do to prevent something from happening. Safety and health matters. It simply does. Every incident is a number. I spoke earlier about an incident rate of 17, and we were really able to get that down really low. And I think it was down like 2.3 or something in a matter of a couple of years. But every incident is a number, right? It is a number. If you look at it from your OSHA logs or things like that, but it's much more than a number. It's a life, right? It's somebody's life somewhere. It's a story of many different sides, many different aspects, and it affects family, friends, and coworkers. So that one event that occurs that, injures somebody seriously or, God forbid, a fatality of some sort, it has an enormous effect on a lot of people. So we have to minimize every number that we possibly can, reduce every number that we possibly can. Talking a little bit about focus and safety and health culture and focus. So culturally ingraining safety into everything you do. We talked about earlier is viewing safety as a value as opposed to a priority. So culturally ingraining safety in everything you do is one of the focuses that you want to stay on. Frontline leadership, safety professionals, management, team players, everybody focuses on, hey, culturally ingrain safety into everything that we do. It's nice. I go see do an inspection or visit a building somewhere, and one of my safety pins is up there on the wall, and a little note or a little circle around something or a highlighter indicates that, that something like that happened somewhere, and the guys kind of made a note of it within themselves to say, hey, look at this, we got to make sure that we make sure that everything is as safe as possible. And that's part of ingraining safety into what we do, culturally ingraining it in. Low risk, low frequency, high risk, take very much consideration, stay focused on that. What is it that you do not very often, but is high risk when you do it? So keep that in your focus. And one of the things I like to talk a lot about is the incident. When people ask me really truly what safety is all about, you have something seriously happen and you walk into that environment where there was just a fatality or a serious injury, and management wants whatever you need, Spiez, time, money, resources, you got it. You got it. Let's make sure that this never happens again, right? But then as time goes on, right, that incident gets back in people's minds a bit. And we kind of go back to what we were. So really the biggest focus is having the incident in people's mind without that incident occurring. And I think if we stay focused in the positive safety and health culture, and we focus on the incident without the incident occurring, I got a big picture. That's fake smoke. We were doing a training involving smoke in a building and how we can get out. But keeping the incident in everybody's mind without it occurring, that's the best safety measures you can do. That's one of the best. And the safety toolbox talk is a great tool for something like that. Frontline leadership is key, absolutely, all the way through. Build great systems, develop good people, create an environment of trust, right? Do right, and do what you say you're going to do. So if frontline leadership is key, and you can come up with this, oftentimes, we tend to blame people, but take a look at the system. See if we got a system that might have been flawed a little bit that we can fix, that we can pair. Build great systems, develop good people. And if you've got an environment of trust, everything else is so much easier. So much easier. So that's a bit about the positive safety and health culture. It really is start and finish with frontline leadership. They're key. They know when the safety person shows up that you better have your vest and your mask and following the policies and procedures and things of that nature. But with frontline leadership, when they appreciate frontline leadership enough where they have it on without frontline leadership telling them, that makes a huge difference. All right, to wrap things up for today, it's all about everybody goes home whole every day. It's about building trust, right? Maintaining trust, increasing trust. It's about leadership and the fundamentals of, hey, you do right, people will follow you. It's about communication, right? Doing good. Communicate well, listen well, be sure to look to be understood or to understand before looking to be understood. Add safety as a value, not as a priority, as a value. And tailgate talks, the perfect tool for frontline leadership when it comes to building trust, demonstrating leadership, providing communication, and encouraging everybody to take a look at safety as a value. So thank you, David.
No, thank Adam and Amanda and all the people who
Yep,
do the hard stuff. I just get to sit on the screen with a silly bow tie on.
Yeah, well, thank you, entire Cornell staff, because this was great.
We have
Thank
time
you,
for a
team.
question or two if folks want to throw something in to see if we can stump Phil.
That would be great.
There's always something we can learn from each other. And we've been sharing these tailgate talks with you for, I think, 2.5 years.
Yeah, it's been quite some time. Yeah, when I looked at the training, I remember doing it with Adam when I looked at it on the Cornell website recently again. It's like, yeah, okay.
Well, remember, if one more person can walk home, we've had a good day.
Yep. Every day goes home. Yep. Everybody goes home whole every day as much as possible. That's right.
Exactly.
Everybody counts.
Sounds good. Thanks, folks. Thanks again, Phil, for a great job.
Yeah.
And for those who are wondering, we'll be sending a certificate for those who stayed on attendance at least 3/4 of the time. And we will be posting a recording of this webinar on the Information Highway, the same place where you can find all of those tailgate talks on the Local Roads Program LTAP webpage. Thanks very much, folks, and have a great day. Bye-bye.